Science has now confirmed what Ernest Holmes declared as metaphysical law nearly a century ago. And the confirmation is not a loose analogy, not a spiritual interpretation of scientific data, not the kind of poetic parallel that inspires but does not instruct. It is a precise, experimentally verified, mechanically exact correspondence between the operating architecture of consciousness and the operating architecture of physical reality at its most fundamental level. You are not a being who has a frequency. You are not a being who generates a frequency. You are not even a being who operates at a frequency. You are the frequency itself, the operative pattern of consciousness energy from which everything in your experience is continuously being generated. This is not a metaphor that Holmes invented to make his teaching more compelling. This is the mechanism, and science has run out of alternative explanations. You have been told, perhaps for decades, that you carry a frequency, that your emotional state, your dominant thoughts, your inner world emit a signal that goes out into a receptive universe and draws back experiences that match its resonance. You have practiced that teaching with discipline and sincerity. You have monitored your thoughts, managed your emotions, and directed your attention toward the outcomes you intended to produce. You have done the work. And still, at this stage in your journey, the gap between what you know and what you're living remains unexplained. Not because the law is wrong, because the framework through which you have been applying it contains a structural error so foundational that no amount of correct application can fully compensate for it. The error is this: you have been told to raise your frequency as if it were a dial you could adjust from the outside. You have been told to match the frequency of your desire as if desire and frequency were two separate things that needed to be brought into alignment through effort, practice, and sustained attention. Holmes reveals that this entire framework, frequency is something you adjust, is architecturally incorrect. And the incorrect framework is the precise reason the adjustment never produces the lasting results the teaching promises. When you attempt to raise a frequency, you are operating from the position of someone who is separate from it, someone who stands apart from the frequency, reaches toward it, and tries to hold it at a higher setting. That position of separation is not a technique problem. It is the problem, because the law does not respond to the frequency you are trying to produce. It responds to the frequency you actually are. You are not adjusting a frequency. You are a frequency. The field around you is not responding to signals you are sending outward in the hope that a receptive universe will return their equivalent. It is responding to what you are, to the specific pattern of consciousness energy that you constitute at the deepest level of your current identification. And what you are is not a choice the field makes. It is a law the field executes without the option of refusal. This distinction is not philosophical. It is operative. It changes what you do, how you do it, and why what you were doing before was producing results that were inconsistent at best and absent at worst. The correction begins here. In this video, we will establish Holmes's teaching on consciousness as frequency, not as metaphor, but as mechanism. And we will construct the precise understanding of what it means to be the frequency, rather than to generate it. We will examine why the field has no choice but to respond to what you are, and how this understanding permanently reorganizes the operative relationship between the practitioner and the law. We will move from the imprecision of frequency as spiritual metaphor into the exactness of frequency as the physical and metaphysical reality Holmes identified, described in the language of science of mind with the structural rigor that language was always intended to carry. This is not an introduction to Holmes. This is a correction of the most widespread misreading of his central teaching. And that correction has consequences for everything you have been practicing. The structure of this investigation will take us from the foundational mechanics of consciousness as the primary operative frequency of all physical reality, through the precise protocol by which the practitioner ceases to generate frequency and begins to embody it, into the specific errors that Holmes identified as the chronic sources of the teaching's failure in practice. Nothing in this video is speculative. Every claim will be grounded in Holmes's own formulations, in the logical consequences that follow from them, and in the experimental findings of modern physics that arrived through a categorically different methodology at the same description of the same reality. The correspondence is not approximate, it is exact. But before we proceed, there is one thing to establish. There is a specific error in the conventional frequency teaching, a fundamental misidentification so thoroughly embedded in the modern spiritual vocabulary that most practitioners are actively reinforcing it in every practice session without awareness, systematically preventing the law from operating at the level where it actually functions. We will isolate that error precisely in Part 4. When we reach it, you will recognize it immediately, not because it will be new to you, but because you will recognize it as something you have been doing. That recognition is not a cause for discouragement. It is the mechanism of correction. Now, before this investigation begins in earnest, there is one action available to you that is not symbolic. It is operative. Write the words, "I am the frequency," in the comments below. Not as a reaction to this content, not as an expression of enthusiasm, as a decree, as the first correct identification you are issuing before the instruction begins. The law responds to declaration. The declaration that correctly identifies the operative reality is not a conclusion you arrive at after the study. It is the ground you stand on before it. Write it now. Then stay precisely here, because what follows will confirm exactly what you have just declared. Ernest Holmes did not use the word frequency as a figure of speech. He used it as a technical description of what consciousness is and how it operates in relation to the physical reality it continuously produces. To understand the precision of his claim, it is necessary to first clear away the popular understanding of consciousness, the understanding that treats it as an inner experience, a subjective awareness, a private movie playing behind the eyes of a biological organism that the physical brain has somehow learned to generate. This popular understanding is not merely incomplete. It is the inverse of the truth that Holmes identified as the foundation of science of mind. Holmes was explicit and unambiguous on this point. Consciousness is not the product of physical processes. It is the primary operative substrate from which all physical processes are organized, expressed, and continuously sustained. The physical world is not the cause of consciousness. It is its most recent effect. This inversion has consequences that extend far beyond the theoretical. If consciousness is primary, If it is the first cause from which all physical experience is produced as effect, then the relationship between the practitioner and their experiential reality is not the relationship of a mind trying to influence an independent material world. It is the relationship of a pattern and its expression. It is the relationship of a mold and the substance it shapes. Holmes used both of these images with specific intent. The mold does not attract the substance. The mold does not negotiate with the substance or hope that the substance will cooperate with its shape. The mold is the determining form, and the substance has no choice but to take the shape the mold presents. This is not a soft analogy. This is the precise structural relationship between the individual consciousness and the physical conditions it inhabits. The universal mind, in Holmes's framework, is not a vast intelligence located somewhere outside the individual, available to be petitioned, pleased, or persuaded. It is the total field of consciousness energy from which all individual consciousness is expressed. It is not a field that consciousness inhabits the way a fish inhabits water, as though the fish and the water were two separate orders of existence that happen to occupy the same space. The universal mind is the field that consciousness is. The individual practitioner is not floating within the universal mind, sending requests upward and waiting for responses downward. The individual practitioner is a specific frequency pattern through which the universal mind is expressing itself at a particular point of individualization. The distinction matters because it changes everything about the direction of causality. In the popular model, the individual petitions or aligns with a larger intelligence. In Holmes' model, the individual is the local expression of that intelligence, and its local expression is governed entirely by the specific frequency pattern the individual constitutes. The word frequency, in this context, carries its full technical meaning. A frequency is a pattern of oscillation, a recurring cycle of organized energy with measurable characteristics. Consciousness, in Holmes's understanding, has precisely these characteristics. It has coherence, the degree to which its various elements are organized in alignment rather than opposition. It has amplitude, the intensity with which its pattern is expressed. And it has the capacity to organize matter and energy in correspondence with its pattern, which is the most consequential of its characteristics and the one that gives Holmes's teaching its operative power. A consciousness of high coherence, a consciousness whose various beliefs, identifications, and habitual patterns are organized in unified alignment around a specific frequency pattern, does not merely influence its experiential field, it determines it. Holmes was precise about the word determines. He was not speaking in the language of probability, not suggesting that a coherent consciousness was likely to produce aligned experiences or was statistically more likely to encounter favorable conditions. He was stating a law. The frequency pattern that the individual consciousness constitutes is the pattern according to which the experiential field is organized, not influenced, not probabilistically shaped, organized. The same way a template determines the shape of what is cast from it. The same way a frequency determines the resonant behavior of every object in its vicinity. The relationship is one of mechanical inevitability, not cooperative alignment. The field expresses what the consciousness is. This is the first cause principle in its most exact formulation. It follows, then, that every external condition in the individual's experience, every circumstance of health, every condition of financial reality, every quality of relationship, is the physical expression of the specific frequency pattern that their consciousness constitutes at any given moment, not a partial expression, not an approximate one, a precise one. The field does not editorialize. It does not add interpretations or apply corrections. It expresses the pattern it receives with the fidelity of a mirror that has no mechanism for distortion. Holmes was categorical. Your world is your consciousness, made visible, not a reflection of your best intentions, not a record of your most recent thoughts, the visible expression of the frequency pattern you actually are, at the deepest level, below the level of the thoughts you choose and the affirmations you recite, at the level of your fundamental identification of what you are. This last point is the one that most practitioners have missed, and it is the point that Holmes placed at the center of his teaching on treatment and transformation. The frequency pattern that the individual constitutes is not determined primarily by the thoughts they choose to think in practice sessions. It is determined by the identification they hold at the level of deepest self-conception. The implicit answer to the question, "What am I?" Not the answer they have memorized from the teaching, not the answer they affirm aloud each morning. The answer that operates beneath both. The answer embedded in every automatic response, every habitual assumption, every reflexive interpretation of experience. That is the operative frequency. That is what the field expresses, and that is what Holmes' teaching is designed to change, not at the surface level of chosen thought, but at the foundational level of operative identity. The implications of this understanding begin to accumulate with the weight of logical consequence. If the operative frequency is determined by the deepest level of identification, and if the experiential field expresses that frequency with mechanical fidelity, then it is not possible to produce lasting change in the experiential field by managing the surface level of thought while leaving the identification beneath it unchanged. This is why sustained affirmation can produce temporary shifts that do not hold. This is why visualization can generate emotional states that fade without leaving corresponding changes in the physical environment. The surface thoughts have shifted. The operative frequency has not. The field expresses the frequency. The field does not respond to the words spoken above it. Holmes described this precisely using the language of mold and substance. The mold, the operative frequency, the deepest identification, is the determinative form. The substance, the universal mind's infinite, undifferentiated creative potential, takes the shape the mold presents, without preference, without resistance, and without the option of presenting a different shape. When the mold is changed, the substance expresses the new form immediately. There is no delay in the substance's response to the mold. The delay that practitioners experience is not a delay in the field's response. It is the delay in the mold itself changing, the delay between intellectual acceptance of a new identity and the deep operative adoption of it at the level where the frequency is actually constituted. Holmes' entire system of spiritual mind treatment was designed to accomplish that adoption, not to speak new words into the field, to change the mold. This is why the distinction between having a frequency and being one is not a matter of semantic preference. It is a structural distinction with precise operative consequences. The being who has a frequency is separate from it, can produce it, can fail to produce it, can produce it well or poorly, can lose it and have to recover it. The being who is the frequency has none of these vulnerabilities. It cannot lose what it is. It cannot fail to produce what it constitutes. The question is not how well it is generating its frequency today. The question is what frequency it is, what identification it holds at the operative level. And the answer to that question is fully and continuously expressed in every dimension of its experiential reality without exception. The universal mind's role in this system is not that of a cooperative external intelligence. It is that of a perfectly responsive medium, a substance of infinite capacity that takes the exact form of the frequency pattern it receives and expresses that form as physical reality with the precision of mathematics. Holmes described the universal mind as pure substance, not in the colloquial sense of matter, but in the philosophical sense of the underlying reality from which all formed things are made. This substance has no preferences of its own. It has no opinions about what form it should take. It has only the one operative principle: the form it takes is the form it is given by the individual consciousness, whose frequency pattern it is expressing. That is the entirety of its function. It is the most perfectly obedient medium in existence. It cannot express anything other than what the frequency pattern it receives determines. It has never expressed anything other than this. It will never express anything other than this. The practitioner who understands this, who understands it not as an inspiring concept, but as the operating code of their own experiential reality, has arrived at the position from which Holmes's entire system of application becomes not merely effective, but inevitable. The question shifts. It ceases to be, how do I get the universe to give me what I want? It becomes, what frequency am I? Because the answer to the second question is the totality of the answer to the first. What you are is what the field expresses. The field is not a separate actor in this system. It is the expression of the actor. And the actor is you, not the surface you that chooses thoughts and recites affirmations, but the deep operative you that constitutes the pattern the universal mind receives and faithfully, precisely, inevitably expresses as the conditions of your life. This is Holmes's teaching at its foundation, not the teaching of how to pray effectively or how to visualize correctly or how to manage the emotional tone of your practice sessions. The teaching of what you are, of the precise nature of the relationship between the individual consciousness and the universal mind, and the operative consequences of that relationship as a matter of inviolable law. The frequency you are is the first cause. The experiential field is the effect. Between them, there is no gap, no negotiation, no intermediary step where the law might fail to operate. The cause produces the effect. The frequency produces the field. This is not metaphor. This is mechanism. And the mechanism has never, in the history of its operation, produced any result other than the one the law dictates. Consider a tuning fork. Strike a tuning fork calibrated to 440 hertz and place it in a room that contains other objects capable of resonant vibration, strings, chambers, metallic surfaces. What happens is not a matter of the tuning fork. sending out a request, not a matter of the fork hoping the room will be receptive, not a matter of the room deciding whether the fork's frequency is worth responding to. The room reorganizes. Every object in the room with a resonant frequency of 440 hertz begins to vibrate in correspondence with the fork's output. Objects with different natural frequencies do not respond. Objects with the matching frequency have no choice. The reorganization is automatic, immediate, and complete. The tuning fork is not adjusting to the room. The room is reorganizing around the tuning fork. This is not a poetic image. It is a precise physical description of the law that Holmes taught operates at the level of consciousness with identical mechanics. The individual consciousness in Holmes's framework functions as the tuning fork. The universal mind, the infinite undifferentiated field of consciousness energy from which all physical reality is continuously produced, functions as the acoustic environment. But the analogy must be extended precisely to preserve its accuracy. The consciousness does not merely cause the field to reorganize in correspondence with its frequency. The consciousness is the frequency pattern in the field, a specific local organization of the universal mind's infinite substance. The tuning fork and the room are two separate physical objects related by the law of acoustic resonance. The individual consciousness and the universal mind are not two separate objects related by correspondence. They are one system expressed at two levels. The individualized pattern and the total field are the same substance, differently organized. This is the point at which Holmes's teaching transcends the tuning fork analogy and becomes something more precise, more complete, and more consequential. The difference between attracting and generating is not a semantic one. It encodes a structural distinction with profound operative consequences. To attract is to be a separate entity that sends out signals and hopes to receive corresponding signals in return, a position that depends on the external field's willingness to cooperate, a position that creates an inherent gap between the practitioner and the result, a position that requires waiting and hoping and monitoring for signs of response. To generate, and more precisely to be, is to constitute the pattern from which the field's expression proceeds. There is no gap between what you are and what the field produces. For the same reason, there is no gap between a mathematical equation and its solution. The equation does not attract its solution from elsewhere. The solution is the inevitable expression of the relationship between the equation's terms. Holmes taught that the relationship between the individual consciousness and the experiential field is precisely analogous. The experiential field is the solution of which the consciousness frequency is the equation. Change the equation and the solution changes. There is no other variable in the system. The field, then, has no choice in the matter. This is a phrase that carries precise technical meaning in Holmes's teaching, and it deserves the full weight of its logical consequence. A system governed by law is a system in which choice, in the sense of arbitrary or unpredictable deviation from the law's consequences, does not exist. The law of acoustics does not allow a tuning fork to occasionally fail to resonate its neighboring objects. The law of mathematics does not allow an equation to occasionally produce a different result. And the law of consciousness, as Holmes formulated it, does not allow the experiential field to occasionally fail to express the frequency pattern it receives from the individual consciousness. The correspondence is total and without exception. The field expressing a different reality than the one the consciousness constitutes is as impossible as 2 plus 2 equaling 5. Not improbable, not unlikely, impossible within the framework of the law. This is what Holmes meant when he spoke with the confidence that distinguished his teaching from every other spiritual system of his era. Not the confidence of belief, but the confidence of someone who had correctly identified an inviolable operating principle and had simply described it accurately. It follows from this that the practitioner's concern can never legitimately be directed toward the field. The field is not the variable. The field is the output. The variable is the consciousness, specifically the frequency pattern that the consciousness constitutes at the level of its deepest operative identification. When the practitioner directs effort toward the field, attempting to manipulate circumstances, attempting to force outcomes, attempting to negotiate with the external conditions of their experience, they are working at the level of effect while leaving the level of cause unchanged. Holmes used a metaphor for this that has the quality of a precision instrument, attempting to change the shadow by rearranging things in the shadow. The shadow is perfectly responsive, not to what you do within it, but to what the object casting it is doing. Change the object. The shadow changes without effort, without resistance, and without the option of remaining the same. The practitioner who has operated in the generator position, treating frequency as something they produce and send outward, has been operating with a model that contains an invisible structural flaw. The flaw is not in the sincerity of the practice. The flaw is not in the quality of the thoughts chosen or the emotional tone maintained. The flaw is in the foundational premise that there is a self that generates a frequency and a field that either does or does not respond to it. That premise places the self in a position of permanent contingency, dependent on the field's cooperation, vulnerable to the field's apparent non-response, unable to explain the persistent gap between the frequency output and the experiential result. Holmes's correction removes the contingency entirely. There is no gap between what you are and what the field expresses. There is no question of whether the field will respond. There is only the question of what frequency you are, and that question has been answered already with perfect accuracy by every condition currently present in your experience. The tuning fork does not doubt that the room will respond. The tuning fork has no mechanism for doubt. It produces its frequency, and the law operates. The practitioner, whose identification is as complete and as structurally certain as the tuning forks, whose consciousness is not attempting to produce a frequency but simply being one, operates with the same absence of doubt, not because they have suppressed their doubts through disciplined positivity, but because the structural position of being the frequency leaves no logical room for doubt. Doubt is the experience of a generator who is uncertain whether the signal has been received. It is not the experience of a pattern that simply is what it is. Holmes described the state of the correctly identified practitioner not as confidence or faith in the conventional sense, both of which still contain a trace of the generator position, a trace of the one who hopes and waits, but as the recognition that the law is already operating, has always been operating, and cannot do otherwise. This is the unshakable logic that Holmes built his entire system upon. Not faith in a benevolent universe, not hope that the law will cooperate with the practitioner's desires. The recognition that the law has no mechanism for non-cooperation, that the correspondence between the consciousness frequency and the experiential field is not a promise that may be kept or broken, but a structural inevitability that has never, in any instance, in any life, in any set of conditions, operated differently than Holmes described. The frequency is expressed as the field. The mold shapes the substance. The first cause produces the effect. The equation yields the solution. These are not four separate metaphors for the same truth. They are four descriptions of the same mechanism, each illuminating a different facet of the same inviolable operational principle. The mechanism is what you are. The expression is what you live. Between them, there is only the law. The practical consequence of this logic is a reorientation so complete that it touches every aspect of the practitioner's relationship with their own experience. When an undesired condition appears in the experiential field, the correctly oriented practitioner does not attempt to fix the condition. The correctly oriented practitioner asks a single question: what frequency am I at the level of operative identification that corresponds to the expression of this condition? The condition is not a problem, it is a report. It is the field's faithful description of the current state of the operative frequency. And a report, once read, provides exactly the information needed to make the correction, not in the field, but in the frequency. Change the frequency. The field has no choice but to change its expression. This is not optimism. This is the operational logic of a system governed by inviolable law. Holmes was not the first to perceive this structure. The Hermetic principle of correspondence, as above, so below, as within, so without, contains the same foundational claim. The internal state and the external condition are not two separate realities that may or may not come into alignment. They are the same reality, expressed at two levels of the same system. Holmes's contribution was to formulate this ancient perception with the structural precision of a working system, not a philosophical insight to be contemplated, but a mechanism to be understood and operated with the reliability of any other lawful process. He was insistent on this point. The law does not work better for the spiritually advanced practitioner. It does not reward devotion or punish inconsistency. It operates with the same indifference to the practitioner's preferences that the law of gravity operates with, producing its effect with the same precision for the novice and the master, for the sincere and the skeptical, for the one who invokes it consciously and the one who invokes it without any understanding of what they are doing. The law does not care whether you understand it. It operates regardless. The precision of this claim is what distinguishes Holmes from the broader tradition of positive thinking and affirmative spirituality. The positive thinking tradition tends to treat the law as a kind of cooperative intelligence that responds to sincerity, persistence, and correct emotional tone, as though the universe were a somewhat exacting but ultimately generous mentor who rewards genuine effort. Holmes's law is categorically different in character. It does not reward. It does not evaluate sincerity. It does not respond to effort. It simply executes. The frequency pattern of the individual consciousness is expressed as the conditions of the experiential field, without variation, without exception, without the possibility of producing any other result. The practitioner who understands this feels not the warmth of a cooperative universe, but the cold authority of a mathematical truth. And in that cold authority, paradoxically, is a more complete empowerment than any warmth could provide, because warmth can be withdrawn. Mathematical truth cannot. The acoustic metaphor extends one final level. When a tuning fork produces its frequency, it does not produce it once and then wait to see how the room responds before deciding whether to continue vibrating. The fork vibrates continuously for as long as its energy permits, and the room's reorganization is not a reaction to an initial signal. It is a continuous response to a continuous frequency. The individual consciousness, in Holmes's framework, is continuously vibrating at its operative frequency, continuously constituting the pattern that the universal mind continuously expresses as the conditions of the experiential field. The field is not the result of a single moment of correct application. It is the continuous expression of a continuous frequency. This is why sustained transformation requires a shift at the level of identity, rather than a shift at the level of practice. Practice produces occasional vibrations at the intended frequency. Identity produces continuous vibration, and it is the continuous vibration, the steady, uninterrupted expression of the operative frequency pattern that produces the sustained, uninterrupted reorganization of the experiential field that practitioners are seeking when they speak of permanent change. The goal is not a better practice session. The goal is a different frequency. The goal is a different identity. The goal is to be the tuning fork, not to occasionally strike it. Before a single technique can be employed effectively, before a single affirmation can carry operative weight, before the law can function at the level Holmes described, one structural shift must be accomplished. And it is a shift not of information, but of position. The practitioner must move from the position of the generator to the position of the frequency itself. This is not a conceptual adjustment. It cannot be accomplished by understanding the distinction intellectually, nodding in agreement, and then proceeding to apply the law in exactly the same way as before, with a new vocabulary attached to the old structure. The shift must be a felt recognition, a change in the actual experiential position from which the practice proceeds. And the difference between the two positions can be identified and inhabited with precision once the practitioner knows exactly what to look for. The generator position has a specific experiential quality that, once named, the practitioner will recognize immediately as the position from which they have been working. In the generator position, there is an implicit gap between the self and the frequency it is attempting to produce. The self reaches toward the intended frequency, toward the feeling of abundance, the feeling of health, the feeling of the relationship already present, and produces it as an output, then releases it into a field that is understood to be separate from the self, and waits. The waiting is the most precise diagnostic indicator of the generator position. Wherever there is waiting, there is a generator. Wherever there is monitoring the field for signs of response, looking for early indications that the law is working, watching for synchronicities, tracking whether circumstances are beginning to shift. There is a generator. The generator is never fully present in the frequency. It is partially present in the frequency and partially present in watching the field to see whether the frequency is having the intended effect. That divided attention is not a minor inefficiency. It is the structural reintroduction of the separation that the law requires you to dissolve. Holmes's instruction on this point was not gentle, and it was not equivocal. The practitioner who issues a treatment, who engages the law through spiritual mind treatment in the way Holmes taught, and then observes the external environment for evidence of the treatment's effectiveness, has immediately compromised the treatment. Not because observation is wrong, but because the act of looking for evidence reintroduces the generator position, the position of one who has sent a signal and is uncertain whether the signal has been received. The certainty of the correctly positioned practitioner is not the emotional certainty of one who feels very confident. It is the structural certainty of one who recognizes that the question of whether the signal has been received does not arise because there is no signal and there is no separate receiver. There is a frequency and there is a field that is its expression. Between them, the question of reception has no meaning. To move from the generator position to the embodiment position requires a specific act of recognition that Holmes described in terms of identity rather than practice. The recognition is this: I am not a being who is trying to achieve the frequency of abundance. I am not in the process of generating or raising or maintaining a frequency. I am a specific expression of the universal mind, a frequency pattern through which infinite intelligence is individualized at this point. And the frequency I am is not a state I enter and exit. It is what I am, at all times, in all conditions. The external conditions that currently appear to contradict this are not evidence that the frequency is wrong or absent. They are the field's accurate report of the frequency I have been, not the frequency I am now declaring myself to be. And the declaration is operative. The declaration made from the embodiment position, made not as a hope, but as a recognition of what is structurally true, is the mold that the universal mind substance immediately begins to fill. This distinction between hope and recognition carries everything. The generator affirms from hope, I am abundant, stated with the implicit understanding that abundance is something not yet present, something that the affirmation is being used to attract or produce. The correctly positioned practitioner recognizes from law, I am the frequency of abundance expressing through this individualized consciousness, stated with the implicit understanding that the frequency is not something being produced, but something that is, by the nature of what consciousness is, already constituting the pattern from which the field must take its form. The difference in the statement is small. The difference in the structural position from which it is made is total, and the field responds not to the words, but to the position. The field responds not to what you say about your frequency. It responds to what frequency you are. The felt quality of the embodiment position is distinct and recognizable, and the practitioner can learn to identify it with increasing precision through deliberate attention. In the embodiment position, there is a quality of settledness that is categorically different from the effortful positivity of the generator. The generator is positive in the way that someone treading water is actively staying afloat. Through continuous effort directed at maintaining the state, the settled quality of embodiment is not the result of effort. It is the absence of effort, the removal of the constant low-level strain of trying to produce, maintain, and project the correct frequency output. When you stop generating and start being, the effort stops. What remains is not emptiness, but a quality of presence that Holmes described in various ways across his work, as the peace that passeth understanding, as the rest that the correctly positioned consciousness inhabits, as the assurance that has nothing to prove because the law requires no proof, and the position of being the frequency requires no management. The movement from generator to embodiment is not a single transition accomplished once and maintained forever. It is a capacity that deepens with practice, not the practice of generating the right frequency, but the practice of recognizing the correct position and returning to it each time the generator pattern reestablishes itself. And it will reestablish itself. The generator pattern is deeply conditioned. It has been reinforced by years of spiritual practice conducted from the generator position, by a cultural framework that treats consciousness as a tool for influencing an external world, by the implicit assumption of separation that underlies most of the conventional frequency teaching. It reestablishes itself not because it is true, but because it is familiar. The practitioner's work is not to suppress it through force, but to recognize it when it appears, and to execute the identity correction, not "I must get back to the right frequency," but "I am the frequency. I have not left it. I have only forgotten what I am." That recognition is not a performance. It is a structural restoration of the correct position. And from the correct position, the law resumes its operation without any further assistance from the practitioner. The preparation for effective application, then, is not a matter of getting into the right emotional state before practice. It is a matter of establishing the correct structural identity before practice. The identity of the consciousness that is the frequency, not the consciousness that is attempting to produce it. Once that identity is established, everything that follows, every affirmation, every visualization, every decree, carries a categorically different operative weight. The same words spoken from the generator position are requests. The same words spoken from the embodiment position are recognitions. The same visualization performed from the generator position is a rehearsal of something desired. The same visualization performed from the embodiment position is the consciousness perceiving from the end already accomplished. The living in the end that Holmes described not as imagination, but as the operative act of the consciousness that knows itself to be the frequency. The position from which the practice proceeds determines what the practice is. Establish the position first, always, without exception. The question that arises naturally at this point is, how long does the establishment of the correct position take? And the answer Holmes gave was consistent with his entire system. It does not take time as an inherent requirement. It takes recognition. Recognition is instantaneous. The recognition that you are the frequency rather than its generator does not require a week of meditation or a month of sustained affirmation. It requires a moment of structural clarity, the moment in which the position shifts, the effort stops, and the settled quality of embodiment replaces the effortful quality of generation. That moment can occur the first time the distinction is encountered for a practitioner whose preparation has been sufficient. It can also be preceded by months of approaching it intellectually without yet inhabiting it structurally. The preparation this section describes is designed to shorten the distance to that moment of recognition, to make the structural position of frequency embodiment as clear and as accessible as possible, so that the moment of recognition, when it comes, arrives as a precise event rather than a gradual drift. Precision is what Holmes demanded of his teaching. Precision is what the law delivers in return. The embodiment position, once inhabited with any degree of consistency, begins to produce its confirmations in the experiential field almost immediately. Not because the law has a preference for quick responses, but because the law has been operating all along, and the shift in identity produces a shift in the frequency that the field is immediately expressing. The practitioner who makes the shift and then looks for these confirmations risks sliding back into the generator position, the position of one who has sent a signal and is watching for evidence of its receipt. The practitioner who makes the shift and then returns their attention to the maintenance of the embodiment position, to simply being the frequency, moment to moment, without reference to the field's behavior, will find that the confirmations appear not as rewards for correct practice, but as the natural, inevitable, unremarkable consequence of a change in what they are. Unremarkable in the sense that a mathematical certainty once understood is unremarkable, not surprising, simply true. The architecture of the preparation, stated with the precision Holmes would have required, is this: before practice, before treatment, before affirmation or visualization or decree, establish the identity. Ask not, what frequency should I generate today? But what frequency am I? And answer the question from the position of the law rather than from the position of current circumstance. Current circumstance reports the past frequency. The identity you declare in this moment is the frequency you are now, and the frequency you are now is the mold into which the universal mind's infinite substance is flowing continuously, inevitably, in correspondence with nothing other than the pattern you constitute. Be the pattern. The substance has no choice but to take its form. This is the first law of Holmes's system, stated as a directive rather than a description. Be the frequency, not generate it, not maintain it. Be it, and from the position of being it, operate whatever practice you choose, with the knowledge that you are not operating from lack toward sufficiency, but from the fullness of a frequency that is already fully constituted and already fully expressed in the substance that the universal mind perpetually presents to the pattern you are. The transition from preparation into application is not a shift in gear. It is a continuation of the same state. The practitioner who has correctly inhabited the embodiment position and then moves into affirmation or visualization or decree is not leaving the position of preparation and entering the position of practice. They are remaining in the position of the frequency and allowing the chosen practice to be its expression. The affirmation is not an attempt to produce the frequency. It is the frequency describing itself. The visualization is not an attempt to attract a desired condition. It is the frequency perceiving from the end already constituted in consciousness. The decree is not a command issued to an external field. It is a frequency recognizing itself as the operative pattern from which the field takes its form. The practices are unchanged. The position from which they proceed is everything. Every practitioner who has experienced a period of apparently effortless results, a period in which the law seemed to operate with an ease and completeness that subsequent periods have failed to replicate, has experienced, without necessarily knowing it, the embodiment position. The practitioner who says, "There was a period when everything seemed to flow, when what I intended seemed to materialize almost without effort, and then something shifted and I have not been able to recover that quality," is describing the experience of having accidentally inhabited the embodiment position, and then, without understanding what had produced the quality, inadvertently departing from it. The departure is always the same. The generator pattern reasserts itself. Attention shifts from being the frequency to monitoring the field, and the structural separation is reintroduced. The effortlessness ends because the embodiment has ended, because the practitioner has moved from being the frequency to trying to produce it again. The path back is not a new effort. It is the recognition of the position and the return to it. The position is always available. The frequency is always what you are. The only question is whether you are remembering it. Holmes' preparation teaching, at its most essential, reduces to a single instruction. Know what you are before you begin. Not what you wish to be, not what you are working to become. What you are, at the level of the law, at the level of the universal mind's infinite and indifferent substance, at the level of the frequency pattern that is already constituted and already being expressed as the field you inhabit. Know what you are, be it deliberately, consciously, and precisely. And from that position of conscious being, allow the practice to proceed as the expression of what you have recognized rather than as the effort of what you are hoping to produce. This is not a technique. This is the foundational structural requirement without which no technique can achieve what Holmes's teaching promises. Establish it first. Return to it always. It is the ground on which everything else is built. The embodiment position has been established. The structural shift from generating the frequency to being it has been described with the precision it requires. What remains is the practical protocol, the step-by-step execution of frequency embodiment as Holmes's teaching requires it to be practiced in the concrete circumstances of the practitioner's daily life. This is not a list of suggestions. It is a sequence of specific operative actions, each with a precise function in the total architecture of the practice, each building on the one before it in a structure that Holmes would have recognized as spiritual mind treatment in its most complete and mechanically exact form. The first step is the identity correction, and it must be executed before any other element of the practice begins. Not after the meditation, not part way through the visualization, not as a correction when the practice begins to feel effortful. Before. The identity correction is a precise linguistic and structural act. The replacement of the generator framing with the embodiment framing, stated with the explicitness of a declaration rather than the tentativeness of an intention. The generator framing says, "I am generating the frequency of abundance," placing the self in the position of the producer, the frequency in the position of the product and the field in the position of the potential receiver. The embodiment framing says, I am the frequency of abundance expressing through this individualized consciousness, placing the self as the frequency itself, the consciousness as the point of individualization through which the universal mind is expressing this specific pattern, and the field as the expression's inevitable physical form. These are not the same statement with different words. They are different structural positions encoded in different grammatical formulations. The grammar matters because it encodes the position, and the position determines the operative quality of everything that follows. The identity correction requires a minimum of 3 minutes of unhurried, deliberate inhabitation before the practice proceeds. Not 3 minutes of repeating the corrected statement, which would be the generator pattern using new language. 3 minutes of actually being in the position the statement describes. Sitting as the consciousness that is the frequency, not the consciousness that is trying to produce it. During these 3 minutes, the practitioner should hold only the recognition. This is what I am. Not this is what I am becoming. Not this is what I am choosing to believe. This is what I am. At the level of the law, at the level of the operating code of reality, at the level that the universal mind recognizes and expresses without preference or delay. The 3-minute minimum is not arbitrary. It is the minimum time required for the shift from intellectual recognition to structural inhabitation to begin producing the physical correlates that confirm the correct position has been established. Those physical correlates constitute the second step, the physical confirmation. Holmes taught that consciousness as frequency is not an abstraction that exists in a separate realm, untouched by and untouchable through the physical body. Consciousness and body are not two separate systems. They are the individualized frequency expressing at different levels of the same system. The frequency of abundance, correctly embodied rather than effortfully generated, produces a specific and recognizable physical quality in the body. It is not the quality of excitement or energized positivity. Those are the physical signatures of the generator position, where the effort of producing and projecting the frequency creates a kind of energized tension in the system. The physical signature of correctly embodied abundance is quieter and more substantial than excitement. It is a relaxed expansion in the chest, not a forced opening, not a deliberate broadening of the shoulders, but the natural physical consequence of a consciousness that has stopped straining toward something absent and settled into the recognition of something present. There is also a quality of settled weight in the lower body, a groundedness that reflects not effort, but completion, the physical expression of a consciousness that is expressing from fullness rather than reaching from lack. The practitioner who does not immediately recognize these physical signatures should not conclude that the correct frequency has not been established. The physical confirmation is a sensitivity that develops with practice. The body's capacity to distinguish between the physical signatures of the different structural positions becomes increasingly precise as the practitioner returns to this step consistently. What is essential at this stage is the understanding that the physical confirmation is not the cause of the correct frequency. It is the evidence that the correct identity has been established. The practitioner does not produce the correct frequency by inducing the physical sensation. The physical sensation appears because the correct identity has been recognized. The direction of causality matters. Consciousness precedes its physical expression, not the other way. But the physical expression, once the practitioner learns to recognize it, becomes a reliable real-time indicator of which structural position is currently operative. The generator's effortful tension or the embodiment's settled expansion. When the identity correction has been made and the physical confirmation recognized, the third step becomes available: the environmental release. This step is the most frequently omitted and the most consequential of the three because it is the one that most directly addresses the mechanism by which the generator pattern re-enters the practice after the identity correction has successfully dislodged it. The environmental release is the deliberate, complete withdrawal of attention from the external environment, the cessation of monitoring, tracking, or attending to the field for evidence of the established frequency's expression. Holmes was precise about why this step is not optional. The practitioner, who embodies the correct frequency and then monitors the environment for evidence of its effect, has immediately reintroduced the generator position. The act of looking for confirmation is the act of one who has sent a signal and is uncertain whether it has been received. That uncertainty is the generator's uncertainty, the uncertainty of separation, the uncertainty of someone whose identity is not yet fully the frequency, but is still partially the one who produces and waits. The logic of the environmental release follows directly from the law. If the field is not responding to the frequency but expressing it, if the field is not a separate system that receives signals from consciousness, but the extension of consciousness into physical form, then monitoring the field for evidence is structurally incoherent. It is the equivalent of a mathematical equation observing the room to see whether its solution will appear. The solution is the inevitable expression of the equation's terms. It does not need to be waited for. It does not need to be tracked. It is already determined by what the equation is. The practitioner who has correctly embodied the frequency and then releases attention from the environment is not practicing trust or faith in the conventional sense. They are not overcoming a doubt through an act of will. They are simply recognizing that the monitoring is structurally incoherent with the position they have established and ceasing a behavior that would otherwise reintroduce the separation, the identity correction dissolved. The environmental release is not passivity. It is not the abandonment of purpose of action in the world. Holmes never taught that the correctly positioned consciousness should sit in stillness and wait for the field to rearrange itself without any participation from the practitioner. The practitioner takes the actions that the embodied frequency naturally produces, the actions that arise from the position of being the frequency rather than the position of trying to produce a result. The difference between these two types of action is not in their external form. A phone call made from the generator position, made as an effort to force a desired outcome, and the same phone call made from the embodiment position, made as the natural expression of the consciousness that is already the frequency of the desired outcome, can look identical from the outside. The internal quality is entirely different, and it is the internal quality that determines the operative frequency the field receives and expresses. Action from the embodiment position is not effortful. It arises naturally, it proceeds without attachment to the outcome, and it does not require the monitoring and evaluation that the generator position demands of every action it produces. The 3 steps function as a system. They are not independent practices that can be selected and applied according to preference. The identity correction without the physical confirmation produces a practice that operates at the intellectual level without descending to the operative level of embodiment. The physical confirmation without the identity correction produces a body-based practice that misses the structural shift the practice is designed to accomplish. And both of these, without the environmental release, produce a practice that correctly establishes the embodiment position and then immediately dismantles it through the reintroduction of the generator's monitoring behavior. The 3 steps are a sequence, and the sequence has a logic. Establish the identity, confirm the embodiment in the physical system, and then maintain the embodiment by releasing the behavior that reintroduces the generator. This is the complete protocol. What the protocol produces, when practiced consistently and precisely, is not a series of better practice sessions. It is the progressive deepening of frequency embodiment as a continuous state rather than an occasional achievement. The practitioner who applies this protocol daily is not practicing generating the right frequency each day. They are practicing being the frequency, and with each application, the embodiment becomes less an act and more an identity, less a practice and more a lived position. Holmes's goal for the practitioner was never more effective practices. His goal was the practitioner whose identity was so completely aligned with the frequency of their intended expression that the practice became indistinguishable from life. Not a special activity performed at designated times, but the continuous operative mode of a consciousness that knows what it is and lives accordingly. The protocol also provides a diagnostic function that the generator's monitoring behavior was attempting but could not achieve correctly. When the practitioner applies the protocol and finds that the identity correction does not fully establish the embodiment position, that the settled quality of the physical confirmation does not appear, that the environmental release feels effortful rather than natural. This is precise diagnostic information. It indicates that the operative identification is currently structured around a frequency pattern that is resistant to the correction at the surface level, which means the correction is needed at a deeper level of identification than the practice session can reach. Holmes's system provides for exactly this situation through the mechanism of spiritual mind treatment, the deeper work of consciousness that addresses the foundational identification rather than the surface expression. The protocol's failure to fully establish embodiment is not a failure of the practitioner. It is a report from the system indicating where the work needs to be directed. The field gives the same report, faithfully and without omission. But the protocol's diagnostic is available before the field's expression has to confirm it. The precision of this protocol reflects the precision Holmes brought to his entire teaching. He was not satisfied with vague instructions to feel better, think more positively, or believe more deeply. He wanted his practitioners to have a mechanism, a specific, reproducible, structurally sound process for moving from the generator position to the embodiment position and maintaining the embodiment position as the operative mode of their consciousness. The protocol described in these 3 steps is that mechanism, derived from the structural logic of his teaching, rather than from the surface language of his affirmations. The affirmations are expressions of the correctly embodied frequency. The protocol is the means by which the correct embodiment is established so that the affirmations are what they need to be. Not attempts to produce a frequency, but a frequency describing itself to the universal mind, whose substance will take precisely the form that description constitutes. Be the frequency. Confirm it in the body. Release the field to express it. This is the complete execution of the law at the level where the law actually operates. The practitioner who applies this protocol with the consistency it deserves will arrive after a period measured not in years, but in weeks of genuine application, at a quality of practice they may not have experienced since the early days of their study, the quality of effortless correspondence between the inner state and the outer expression, the quality of a life that is moving in the direction of its intended frequency, not through struggle, but through structural alignment. Holmes promised this quality not as an aspirational possibility, but as a logical inevitability. The law operates. The frequency is expressed as the field. The field has no choice. The only remaining variable is whether the practitioner chooses to be the frequency consciously, deliberately, and precisely, or to continue attempting to generate it from a position of separation that the law has no mechanism for rewarding. The choice, stated with Holmes' precision, is not between effort and ease. It is between the generator and the frequency, between the shadow chaser and the object whose movement produces the shadow, between the practitioner who hopes the law will work and the thinker who recognizes that it already is. You have been given a teaching about frequency. You have been told with sincerity, and in some cases with considerable sophistication, to raise your frequency, maintain your vibration, match the energy of your desires, and hold the signal. You have practiced this teaching. You may have practiced it for years, and in the private accounting that practitioners of this persuasion make honestly with themselves, late, when the day's affirmations have been completed and the results of the field have been quietly registered, you know that the teaching has not consistently produced what it promised. Not because you have been insincere, not because you have practiced incorrectly within the framework given, but because the framework itself contains a foundational error that no degree of correct practice within it can overcome. Holmes identified this error with the precision of a diagnostician who had seen the pattern 1,000 times. He named it not to condemn those who had made it, but to provide the correction that the teaching's chronic ineffectiveness demanded. The first and most fundamental error is what we will call the adjustment attempt, and it is the error embedded in the very instruction to raise your frequency. Consider the structural implication of that instruction. If you are told to raise your frequency, the instruction presupposes three things simultaneously. First, that your frequency is currently at an insufficient level. Second, that you are separate from your frequency, existing in a position from which it can be observed and adjusted. And third, that the act of adjustment, the reaching toward a better frequency from the position of the one who does not yet have it, is the correct operative act. Holmes identified all three of these presuppositions as errors, but the third is the one that makes the instruction its own antidote, because the act of attempting to adjust a frequency confirms at the deepest level of consciousness, not the level of chosen thought, but the level of operative identity, that you are the adjuster rather than the frequency. And the adjuster is, by definition, the generator position, the structural separation, the mold that has taken the shape of reaching toward rather than being it. And the field expresses exactly that pattern, a consciousness in perpetual approach to a frequency it has not yet reached. Perpetual approach, never arrival. This is the precise mechanism by which the adjustment attempt produces its characteristic result. Consistent effort without consistent embodiment, temporary shifts without permanent transformation, the experience of almost having it followed by the experience of losing it. Holmes described this pattern with a metaphor drawn from his understanding of the universal mind's perfect responsiveness. The consciousness that approaches its desired frequency, while in the position of lack, confirms lack as its operative frequency, and the universal mind expresses lack with the same precision and the same indifference with which it would express abundance, if the operative frequency were abundance instead of the reaching for abundance. The field is not cruel. It is not testing the practitioner's sincerity or rewarding insufficient effort with insufficient results. It is simply expressing the frequency it receives, and the frequency produced by the adjustment attempt is the frequency of one who does not yet have what they are reaching for. The field expresses precisely that, not what is being reached for, but the reaching. This is why the conventional frequency teaching, applied with complete sincerity, produces results that feel maddeningly close but never complete. The practitioner elevates their emotional state. Synchronicities appear. Small improvements accumulate. The law seems to be responding. But the desired outcome, the complete, stable, fully expressed condition of health, abundance, or relationship, does not fully materialize, and when it seems to approach, often retreats. Holmes's diagnosis of this pattern is exact. The law is responding perfectly. It is expressing the frequency of partial approach, the frequency of a consciousness that is working very hard to get close to the desired condition without yet having made the identification that would constitute the frequency of the condition itself. Close is a frequency. The field expresses close, permanently, faithfully, and without the possibility of producing the full arrival that the practitioner's effort is sincerely directed toward, as long as the operative identification remains that of the one who is trying to get there. The correction Holmes prescribes is not a refinement of the adjustment attempt. It is its replacement. You cannot adjust what you are. You can only recognize what you are and stop mistaking the reaching for the being. The recognition that you are already the frequency, not at a level that requires raising, not in a state that requires improving, but as the complete and exact expression of the universal mind at this specific point of individualization, is not a reframe of the adjustment teaching in more confident language. It is a categorically different act. The adjustment attempt is an act of the will directed at producing a better state. The recognition is an act of the intelligence directed at correctly identifying the state that already is. Holmes was unambiguous. The universal mind does not express your improved output. It expresses your operative identity. And your operative identity is not determined by the quality of your adjustment attempts. It is determined by the depth of your recognition of what you already are. The second error follows logically from the first, and it is the error that exhausted practitioners are most likely to recognize as their own experience. We will call it the frequency maintenance effort. This is the error of attempting to hold or maintain a specific frequency through sustained vigilance, staying positive, keeping the vibration high, monitoring the emotional state for dips, and correcting them immediately, treating the maintenance of the correct frequency as a full-time occupation that demands continuous effort and produces, when the effort is sustained for any length of time, a particular kind of spiritual fatigue that has no polite name in the conventional teaching. This fatigue is not weakness. It is the predictable physical consequence of a consciousness that is performing a structural impossibility, trying to maintain from the outside something that can only be inhabited from the inside. Holmes was categorical on this point, and the logic he employed is airtight. The correct frequency is not an achievement to be maintained through vigilance. It is a recognition to be inhabited through correct identification. The distinction is the difference between performance and being. The performer maintains the performance through sustained effort. The performance can fail, can slip, can require correction and recovery. The being who knows what they are does not maintain it. They simply are it. The way a tuning fork does not maintain its frequency after being struck. The frequency is the tuning fork's nature. It does not require management. It does not require the tuning fork to remain vigilant against the possibility of vibrating at a different frequency. It vibrates at the frequency it is, because that is what it is. The effort to maintain the frequency is evidence, Holmes taught, that the identification has not yet been made, because the consciousness that has correctly identified itself as the frequency does not need to maintain it. There is nothing to maintain. There is only something to recognize, and recognition, unlike maintenance, does not exhaust itself. This error is particularly prevalent among experienced practitioners because it is reinforced by early successes in the teaching. When the practitioner first begins to practice frequency elevation, the initial shift from the habitual baseline to a more elevated emotional state produces noticeable results in the field. The field responds to the change in frequency, even a temporary change, and the practitioner correctly identifies this as confirmation of the law's operation. The error is in the conclusion drawn from this confirmation, that what is required is the permanent maintenance of the elevated state. Permanent maintenance, as if the elevated state were a property that, once produced, must be continuously reproduced to remain operative. Holmes's correction reframes the entire dynamic. The initial shift was not the production of a better frequency that then needed to be maintained. It was a brief inhabitation of the embodiment position, a moment in which the reaching stopped and the being began, that produced a glimpse of what the law looks like when operating from the correct structural position. The task is not to maintain that glimpse forever through effort. The task is to make the structural shift from generator to frequency permanent through correct identification, so that the elevated state is not a peak achieved through effort, but a ground inhabited through recognition. The two errors together, the adjustment attempt and the frequency maintenance effort, constitute the full architecture of the generator position and explain, with the precision Holmes demanded, why practitioners of genuine sincerity and considerable experience continue to produce inconsistent results from a teaching they understand and apply correctly within its own framework. The framework is the problem. The correct application of the wrong framework will always produce the results of the wrong framework. Holmes's replacement framework, frequency as identity rather than frequency as adjustment, does not require more effort than the generator position. It requires less. It requires only the recognition that was always available, always sufficient, and always capable of producing exactly what the teaching promised. The moment the structural position from which the recognition is made is correct. Holmes spoke to the accomplished practitioner, to the one who had studied long enough to be dangerous, who had accumulated sufficient understanding to apply the law's language with fluency while remaining, beneath that fluency, in the structural position of the generator. He was not speaking to beginners. He was speaking to you, to the practitioner who has done the work, who has earned the right to the correction, and who is ready to receive it not as an instruction to try harder, but as the precise identification of the mechanical error that has stood between the knowing and the having. The instruction Holmes would offer at this stage of the understanding is not a new practice. It is the recognition that changes the quality of every practice already established. You have never been a separate being sending signals into a field that may or may not respond to them. Not for a single moment in the history of your practice. Not even in the moments when the field appeared most unresponsive, most resistant, most thoroughly indifferent to the signals you were sending with such care and consistency. The appearance of non-response was not the field failing to receive the signal. It was the field expressing with absolute fidelity the frequency of the consciousness that was experiencing itself as a signal sender. A consciousness experiencing itself as separate from the field is expressing the frequency of separation. The field expresses separation. This is not the field failing. This is the field succeeding, expressing exactly what it received with the precision of a mirror that has no mechanism for distortion. You have always been the field itself, expressing as an individual pattern of consciousness frequency. This is not an inspiring reframe of your situation. It is a description of the structural reality that has been operative throughout every session of prayer, treatment, affirmation, and visualization you have ever conducted. The field did not exist separately from you, receiving your signals and deciding how to respond. The field was expressing you. The frequency, you were at the level of operative identification with perfect, continuous, and complete fidelity. Every condition in your experience has been the field's accurate and faithful expression of that frequency. Not a punishment, not a reward, an expression. As accurate and as inevitable as a shadow is the accurate and inevitable expression of the object casting it. This means that every condition in your experience, including the conditions that have most persistently refused to change despite your most sustained and sincere application of the law, is the field's accurate report of the frequency you have actually been, at the level of operative identification, beneath the level of the thoughts you have chosen and the affirmations you have recited. The report is not wrong. The report is not unfair. The report is, from Holmes's perspective, the most precise and useful feedback the practitioner can receive. because the report tells you exactly, without ambiguity or delay, what frequency you have been at the operative level. Read the report accurately, and the correction becomes not merely possible, but immediately available. The condition in the field is the frequency in consciousness, made visible. Change the identification. The frequency changes. The field has no choice but to express differently. It cannot express anything other than what you are. This is not a law that responds to your preferences. It is a law that reflects your identity. The instruction then is precise and without qualification. Be what you intend the field to express. Not work toward being it. Not practice generating it. Not maintain the feeling of it through sustained effort. Be it at the level of identification, at the level of what you recognize as the operative truth of what you are, at the level where the universal mind receives its instructions from the individual consciousness and fulfills them with the precision of pure substance, taking the shape of the mold it has been given. The mold changes. The substance takes the new shape. This is not a metaphor requiring faith. It is the mechanics of the first cause principle operating in the only way it has ever operated, producing results with the only precision it has ever expressed for every practitioner who has ever correctly inhabited the position that Holmes's teaching describes. The field will express it. It has no other option. It has never had one. The law does not permit one. The experimental findings of modern physics do not describe a universe that resembles Holmes's teaching. They describe a universe that is structurally identical to it, with a precision that exceeds what any interpretive generosity could account for, and that places the correspondence beyond the category of metaphorical resonance into the category of mechanistic equivalence. The specific area of physics in which this equivalence is most exact is quantum field theory, the framework developed through the 20th century to describe the fundamental constituents of physical reality and the fields from which they arise. What quantum field theory reveals about the nature of matter, about the relationship between particles and fields, and about the role that the observing consciousness plays in the determination of physical outcomes is not a series of loose parallels to Holmes's teaching. It is the same structural description of the same underlying reality arrived at through the rigorous application of mathematics rather than the rigorous application of metaphysical logic. And the convergence of the two routes on the same destination is not coincidence. It is the fingerprint of a truth about reality that is independent of the method used to uncover it. In quantum field theory, what we call particles, the electrons, quarks, photons, and other fundamental constituents that compose all physical matter, are not discrete objects existing independently in space with fixed properties and definite positions. This is not a philosophical claim or a matter of interpretation. It is what the mathematics describes and what the experiments confirm. A particle is not a thing that has a frequency. It is a frequency pattern, a specific, localized excitation of an underlying quantum field that constitutes the substrate of all physical reality. The electron is not an object that vibrates at a particular frequency. It is a specific excitation pattern in the electron field, a pattern whose properties, including its mass, its charge, and its spin, are expressions of the specific frequency pattern it constitutes rather than attributes of a separate material object that happens to vibrate. Remove the field and there is no particle. The particle and the field are not two separate things. The particle is the field, locally organized as a specific pattern of excitation. The correspondence to Holmes's teaching becomes exact at this point. Holmes taught that the individual consciousness is not a separate entity that has a frequency and inhabits the universal mind field. The individual consciousness is a specific frequency pattern through which the universal mind field is locally organized, a specific excitation of the infinite field of consciousness energy, whose properties are expressions of the pattern it constitutes rather than attributes of a separate entity that exists in some prior state and then acquires a frequency. Remove the universal mind, and there is no individual consciousness. The individual consciousness and the universal mind are not two separate things in the same relationship as a fish and the ocean. They are the same substance organized at two levels, the total field and its specific local pattern, with exactly the structural relationship that quantum field theory describes between the quantum field and the particle it produces. The implications for causality are identical in both frameworks. In quantum field theory, the properties of a particle, what it is, how it behaves, what it interacts with, are fully determined by the excitation pattern it constitutes in the underlying field. The particle does not choose its properties, does not petition the field for favorable attributes, does not attempt to adjust its frequency to attract better interactions. It is the pattern it is, and its properties and interactions are the fully determined consequences of that pattern. In Holmes's framework, the conditions of the individual's experiential reality, their health, their prosperity, their relationships, are fully determined by the frequency pattern their consciousness constitutes in the universal mind. The individual does not choose their conditions by interacting with an independent external world. Their conditions are the fully determined expression of the frequency pattern they are, the direction of causality, the absence of a gap between pattern and expression, the impossibility of the field producing anything other than the exact expression of the pattern it receives. All of this is structurally identical between the quantum mechanical description and Holmes's metaphysical one. The measurement problem in quantum mechanics adds a dimension to this correspondence that Holmes's teaching addresses with specific force. The measurement problem refers to a foundational puzzle in quantum mechanics. Before a quantum system is observed or measured, it exists in a state of superposition, a state in which multiple possible outcomes coexist simultaneously, none of them actualized. The act of observation, the interaction of the measuring consciousness with a quantum system, causes the superposition to collapse into a single, definite outcome. Before observation, the particle has no definite position, no definite momentum, no definite state. The act of consciousness, the act of directed observational attention, is what produces the definite physical fact from the range of possibilities. This is not a matter of the instrument disturbing the particle. The mathematics is precise. Before the observation, the definite state does not exist. The observation produces it. Consciousness is not incidental to the production of physical reality. It is operative in it. Holmes's teaching anticipated this finding, not as a loose prediction, but as a structural feature of his entire metaphysical framework. Holmes taught that the universal mind, as pure undifferentiated substance, exists in a state of infinite potentiality, the total field of all possible expressions, none of them actualized in the absence of the specific frequency pattern that the individual consciousness constitutes. The individual consciousness, by constituting a specific frequency pattern, is the operative cause of the actualization of specific conditions from the infinite field of potential. This is not an approximate description of the quantum measurement process. It is the same description using a different vocabulary. The universal mind's infinite potentiality is the quantum superposition of all possible outcomes. The individual consciousness's specific frequency pattern is the measurement, the act of directed conscious attention that collapses the field of infinite possibility into the specific, actualized conditions of the experiential reality. Holmes's practitioner, who correctly embodies the frequency of abundance, is not hoping that an external field will deliver abundance. They are performing the operative act, the conscious actualization from the infinite field of potential, that the quantum mechanical framework would describe as the measurement that collapses superposition into definite physical fact. The quantum physicist David Bohm, working independently and with full mathematical rigor in the latter half of the 20th century, developed a framework for understanding quantum mechanics that he called the implicate order. The idea that the apparent physical world of separate, independent objects is the explicate order, an unfolded expression of a deeper implicate order in which all things are non-locally interconnected and in which the apparent independence of objects is a product of the level of description rather than the level of fundamental reality. Bohm's implicate order is not a metaphysical speculation. It is a mathematically grounded alternative interpretation of quantum mechanics that resolves several of its most fundamental paradoxes, and it is structurally identical to Holmes's universal mind, the infinite, undifferentiated field of consciousness substance from which all individual forms are expressions, in which all individual consciousnesses are non-locally interconnected, and from which the apparent independence of objects and conditions is a feature of the physical level of expression, rather than a feature of the underlying reality. The non-locality of quantum mechanics, the experimental confirmation that quantum entangled particles remain instantaneously correlated regardless of the physical distance between them, a correlation that cannot be explained by any mechanism of signal transmission and that led Einstein to his famous characterization of it as spooky action at a distance, is the physics of what Holmes described as the universal mind's seamless nature. In the universal mind, there is no separation between individual consciousnesses. The apparent separation is a feature of the physical level of expression, the individualized forms through which the universal mind is expressing at particular points. At the level of the field itself, the separation does not exist. Holmes is teaching that every individual consciousness is simultaneously individualized and unified, a specific frequency pattern in a total field that is itself undivided, has the structure of a non-locally correlated quantum system. The individual parts are distinct in expression while remaining part of the same undivided field at the level of their underlying reality. The quantum Zeno effect provides one of the most precise correspondences to Holmes's teaching on sustained identification as the operative mechanism of the law. The quantum Zeno effect is the experimentally verified phenomenon in which a quantum system that is continuously observed in a specific state is inhibited from evolving away from that state. The act of continuous conscious observation stabilizes the quantum system in the observed state. The more frequently the system is observed to be in a particular state, the more effectively the quantum law inhibits its transition to any other state. This is not a metaphor for Holmes's teaching. It is the quantum mechanical description of the same mechanism. The practitioner who continuously maintains the identification, who continuously recognizes themselves as the frequency of abundance, is, in quantum mechanical terms, continuously measuring the system in the abundant state, and the quantum Zeno effect ensures that the system is stabilized in that state rather than evolving toward any other. Sustained identification is not mere positive thinking. It is the operative mechanism that physics has experimentally verified as the mechanism by which continuous conscious observation stabilizes a quantum system in the observed state. The double-slit experiment, the most famous and most fundamental demonstration in quantum mechanics, adds one final dimension to this correspondence. In the double-slit experiment, a particle sent toward a barrier with two slits will, if unobserved, pass through both slits simultaneously and create an interference pattern on the detection screen behind the barrier, the pattern of a wave, not a particle. If a measurement is made to determine which slit the particle passes through, if the observation collapses the quantum superposition by acquiring definite information about the particle's path, the interference pattern disappears and the particle behaves as a discrete object passing through one slit. The observation changes the physical result, not the particle's physical interaction with the measuring apparatus. The information acquired by consciousness. The acquisition of information by consciousness is the operative event that changes the physical outcome. This is what Holmes called first cause. The thought, the specific, directed attention of the individual consciousness, is not merely correlated with physical outcomes. It is their operative antecedent. Physics confirms this not as a matter of spiritual belief, but as a matter of experimental fact, replicated thousands of times across laboratories in dozens of countries across more than a century of quantum mechanical investigation. The correspondence between Holmes's framework and quantum field theory is not a series of happy coincidences between metaphysical intuition and scientific discovery. It is the convergence of two rigorous investigations, one conducted through the logic of consciousness and one conducted through the logic of mathematics, on the same structural description of the same fundamental reality. Holmes did not borrow from physics. Physics arrived through a path that began with the anomalous behavior of light and ended with the quantization of every field in the universe. At the same conclusions Holmes had reached through the logic of first cause, universal mind, and the primacy of consciousness as the operative substrate from which all physical reality is continuously organized. The thinker produces the thought. The thought is the mold. The universal mind substance fills the mold. The physical condition is the result. The quantum field's excitation pattern produces the particle. The particle's properties are the pattern's expression. Between them, There is the same inviolable correspondence, the same absence of a gap, the same mathematical certainty of effect following cause. Holmes' law and physics law are the same law, stated in different languages. The practitioner who understands this correspondence does not derive comfort from it in the way that spiritual teachings sometimes use scientific language for emotional reassurance. They derive from it something more valuable, the recognition that the law they are operating is not a spiritual opinion. It is the operating code of reality at its most fundamental level, confirmed by the most rigorous investigative methodology available to the human intellect. The law does not operate because Holmes believed it did. It operates because it is the structural reality of the relationship between consciousness and the physical field at every level, from the quantum to the cosmic. You are not a being who is attempting to work with a law that may or may not cooperate with your intentions. You are the frequency pattern through which the universal mind is expressing at this specific point of individualization. And the expression of that pattern as physical reality is not a matter of spiritual hope. It is a matter of quantum mechanical inevitability. Physics has run out of alternative explanations. The precise language of quantum field theory, fields, excitations, patterns, superposition, collapse, non-locality, the Zeno effect, maps onto Holmes's language with a structural fidelity that the most skeptical intellect must acknowledge is beyond the reach of coincidence or creative interpretation. The universal mind is the quantum field. The individual consciousness is the field's local excitation pattern. The experiential conditions are the pattern's physical expression. The act of conscious identification is the measurement that collapses infinite potential into specific, actualized reality. Sustained identification is the Zeno effect that stabilizes the system in the identified state. The seamless interconnection of all individual consciousnesses at the level of the universal mind is the non-local correlation confirmed by quantum entanglement experiments. Every element of Holmes's framework corresponds to a specific, experimentally verified element of the quantum mechanical description of physical reality. The framework is not an inspired approximation, it is a precise map. And maps of this precision exist for only one reason. They were drawn of the actual territory. She did not come to the science of mind seeking comfort. She came seeking resolution, the specific resolution of a tension that her doctoral work in quantum field theory had created and that no subsequent inquiry had dissolved. Her dissertation had been a rigorous mathematical treatment of quantum field theory's implications for the relationship between consciousness and physical reality. The mathematics was sound. The experimental data was unambiguous, but the frameworks available for interpreting that data, the Copenhagen interpretation, the many worlds interpretation, the decoherence theories, all handled consciousness in one of two unsatisfying ways, either by dismissing it as irrelevant to the fundamental description of physical reality, which the experimental data on the measurement problem made philosophically untenable, or by invoking it in ways that were structurally vague, philosophically incomplete, and incapable of providing the mechanistic precision that a physicist's training demanded. Her dissertation had ended not with a resolution, but with a precisely articulated description of the gap. She had named what was missing. She had not found it. She arrived at Holmes's work through a footnote in a philosophy of physics paper she was reviewing for a colleague. A passing reference to science of mind as a framework that had made claims about the primacy of consciousness in the production of physical reality that bore examination in the light of quantum mechanics. The reference was dismissive. She was not. She read The Science of Mind with the same methodological rigor she applied to everything, not as a reader looking for confirmation or inspiration, but as an investigator looking for structural precision or its absence. What she found was not what she had expected. She had expected the kind of imprecise enthusiasm that characterizes most attempts to connect spiritual teaching with scientific language, the enthusiastic identification of metaphors that inspire without instructing, that correlate without corresponding. She found instead a structural description of the relationship between consciousness and the physical field that was not metaphorical. It was mechanistic, it was precise, and it matched her mathematics. The specific concept that reorganized her understanding was the distinction Holmes drew between consciousness as frequency generator and consciousness as frequency itself. The difference between a source that produces signals and a pattern that is the signal. She had been attempting in her dissertation to describe the role of consciousness in the quantum measurement process, the mechanism by which the act of observation collapses the wave function into a specific physical outcome. The prevailing frameworks describe this as consciousness interacting with the quantum field from the outside, as an observer that influences the field's behavior without being part of it. Holmes's framework described the same relationship differently. The individual consciousness is not outside the field, interacting with it. It is a specific pattern within the field, an excitation of the underlying substance, and the measurement is not consciousness acting on the field, but the field recognizing its own pattern. The observer and the observed are not two separate entities in a relationship of influence. They are one system expressing at two levels of the same reality. The recognition was not gradual. She described it as the resolution of an equation, the moment when the variable that had been producing the inconsistency was correctly identified and the mathematics suddenly balanced. The theological language she had prepared herself to tolerate, the language of universal mind, of first cause, of the thinker and the thought, was, she recognized in that moment, not spiritual poetry requiring translation into scientific language. It was a parallel formalization of the same structural reality that her equations described, using a vocabulary developed not in a laboratory, but through the same basic investigative act. The rigorous examination of the relationship between consciousness and the physical reality it appears to inhabit. Holmes had examined this relationship from the inside, from the perspective of the consciousness investigating its own nature and its operative relationship with the world it experiences. Physics had examined it from the outside, from the perspective of the mathematician and the experimentalist investigating the behavior of the physical world at its most fundamental level. Both had arrived at the same structural description, the inside and the outside of the same truth. She spent the following 3 years working at the intersection of quantum field theory and the framework Holmes had developed, producing papers that were unusual in their discipline for their willingness to engage with the metaphysical implications of the quantum mechanical data rather than deflecting them through interpretive frameworks designed to preserve the conventional assumption of consciousness as observer rather than participant. The work was not universally welcomed. It was not designed to be. It was designed to be precise, to follow the logical and mathematical consequences of the data wherever they led, regardless of the philosophical discomfort of the destination. The destination, reached through 3 years of rigorous investigation, was the same destination Holmes had reached nearly a century earlier. Consciousness is not incidental to physical reality. It is its operative antecedent. The thinker is first cause. The thought produces the mold. The universal mind substance fills the mold, and the physical condition that results is not influenced by consciousness. It is its expression. The field and the consciousness are one system. The expression and the expressed are one event. Holmes had not borrowed from physics. Physics had arrived through the longer route at the same address. Her work remained in circulation for decades after its completion, cited not only in physics literature, but in the literature of consciousness studies, philosophy of mind, and integrative medicine, fields that were all, in their different ways, attempting to describe the same structural reality that Holmes had described and that her equations had confirmed. She never described herself as a follower of Holmes's teaching. She described herself as a physicist who had confirmed through the methodology available to her discipline what Holmes had described through the methodology available to his. She regarded the correspondence not as mystical, but as methodological, as the natural consequence of two different tools of investigation being applied with sufficient rigor to the same underlying reality. When asked whether this confirmation changed how she lived, she said, "It changed what I recognized as the variable." I had been treating the external conditions of my life as fixed parameters and trying to optimize my responses to them. After understanding the correspondence, I understood that the conditions were the output and I was the input. I stopped optimizing my responses. I started recognizing what I was. The conditions, she said without further elaboration, began to correspond. Holmes's teaching on consciousness as frequency is not an elaboration of the law of attraction. It is the correction of the foundational error on which the law of attraction, in its conventional formulation, has been built and applied. The conventional formulation places the practitioner in the position of the generator. The consciousness that produces a frequency output releases it into a field that is understood to exist separately from the consciousness, and then waits for matching experiences to return from that field. This formulation is internally consistent, emotionally accessible, and operatively insufficient. It is insufficient not because the law it describes is wrong, but because the structural position it assigns to the practitioner is the precise structural position from which the law cannot function at the level where it actually operates. The generator sends signals into an external field and hopes for correspondence. The law, as Holmes formulated it, does not operate between the generator and the field. It operates between the frequency and its expression. The generator is not the frequency. The generator is a structural misidentification that keeps the practitioner perpetually in the position of output and waiting, rather than the position of being and expressing. The structural reorganization Holmes's teaching requires is complete and without partial measures. It is not possible to adjust the generator framework in the direction of the embodiment framework by trying harder, by generating the frequency with more conviction, by maintaining the signal for longer periods, or by increasing the emotional intensity of the practice. These efforts are, without exception, efforts of the generator, and the generator, however skilled and however sincere, is operating at the level of effect rather than cause. The generator position is the effect of a deeper identification with the self as something separate from the universal mind field. The embodiment position is the cause, the identification with the self as the frequency pattern through which the universal mind field is expressing at this specific point of individualization. These are not 2 degrees on the same scale. They are 2 structurally different positions with 2 structurally different operative relationships to the law. From the embodiment position, the law functions with the inevitability of mathematical consequence. From the generator position, it functions occasionally and inconsistently, in proportion to the brief moments in which the generator's effortful practice accidentally produces a genuine embodiment. The consequence of this reorganization for everything the practitioner does, every affirmation, every visualization, every act of spiritual mind treatment, is not that the practices change. The practices can remain exactly as they were. The consequence is that the practices become what they were always intended to be, rather than what the generator position had allowed them to be. A spiritual mind treatment conducted from the embodiment position is not a request to the universal mind. It is the universal mind, through the individual consciousness that is its localized expression, recognizing its own nature at the specific point of that individualization, and thereby completing the circuit through which the pattern is actualized as physical condition. A visualization conducted from the embodiment position is not the imagination of a desired future. It is the consciousness that is already the frequency of the desired condition, perceiving from the position of its fulfillment, perceiving from the end, as Holmes and his contemporaries consistently described the correctly executed act of mental treatment. The imagination is not the cause of the condition. The identification is. The visualization is the expression of the identification, not the substitute for it. From the correct position, the question the practitioner asks changes permanently. The question is never again, how do I attract what I want? That question encodes the generator's structural assumption, the assumption of separation between the self and the desired condition, the assumption of a field that may or may not cooperate, the assumption of output and waiting and hope. The question from the embodiment position is, what frequency am I? Because what you are is what the field expresses, and the field's expression is not a matter of cooperation or coincidence. It is a matter of law. What you are is expressed completely, continuously, without the option of not expressing it. The law does not evaluate what you are and decide whether to express it. It expresses it. This is the totality of its function, and this is the totality of Holmes's teaching, stated at its most fundamental level. Know what you are. Be it. The field expresses it. These are not 3 separate instructions. They are one event, described sequentially for the purpose of instruction, but operative simultaneously and without a gap between the knowing, the being, and the expressing. The practitioner who arrives at this understanding, who arrives at it not as an inspired concept, but as the structural reality of their operative relationship with the universal mind, has not acquired a new technique. They have undergone the only transformation that Holmes's teaching was ever designed to produce: the permanent reorganization of the operative identity from the generator position to the frequency position. From this position, the law functions with the cold, certain, indifferent precision of mathematics, not because the practitioner has finally done enough, believed enough, or maintained enough, because they have correctly identified what they are, and the law, which has always been operating and has always been expressing exactly what they were at the operative level, now expresses the correct identification with the same inevitability with which it expressed every previous one. The law has not changed, the variable has. And when the variable changes, the expression changes, without negotiation, without delay, without the option of producing any other result. The field around you is not waiting for you to get your frequency right before it cooperates with your desires. It is not evaluating your output and deciding whether it merits a corresponding response. It is not a teacher who withholds the lesson until the student has demonstrated sufficient preparation. These are the framings of the generator position, the framings of a consciousness that understands itself to be separate from a field that may or may not respond. They do not describe the actual operative relationship between you and the universal mind. The actual relationship is this: the field is expressing you precisely, continuously, and without any option to do otherwise, not expressing your intentions, not expressing your hopes, expressing the frequency you are at the level of your deepest operative identification in every condition of your experiential reality, at every moment, without exception. This means something that the generator position has never allowed you to fully receive. You have never been at the mercy of an external field that may or may not respond to your signals. Never. Not in the years of what seemed like non-response. Not in the periods of what seemed like partial response that faded before the full expression arrived. Not in the moments of discouragement that followed the sessions of your most sincere and disciplined practice. In every one of those moments, the field was responding with perfect precision, expressing the frequency you actually were at the operative level, rather than the frequency you were attempting to produce. This is not a consolation. This is a correction of the premise from which the discouragement arose. The discouragement assumed a field that was withholding. The field does not have the mechanism for withholding. It only has the mechanism for expressing. It was expressing you. The question the discouragement should have triggered is not, why is the field not responding? It is, what frequency am I that corresponds to this expression? You have always been the source from which the field receives its instructions. Every condition in your experience, every circumstance that you have attributed to luck, to timing, to the decisions of other people, to the mysterious operation of a universe whose logic you could not fully discern, has been the field's faithful execution of the frequency you were. Not a partial execution, not a distorted one, a faithful one. The mold you presented, the field filled, the pattern you constituted, the universal mind expressed. This has been the operative reality of your entire experience. From the first moment you were capable of constituting a frequency pattern as an individualized expression of the universal mind through every moment that has followed. The law has never, in your experience, operated differently. You have simply not always been in a position to recognize it as the law's faithful operation rather than as the world's independent behavior. The question, then, has never been how to influence the field. That question contains the generator's entire structural error, the assumption of separation, the assumption that influence is the correct operative relationship between the consciousness and the field. The question has always been what frequency to be, and the answer to that question is not a spiritual goal to be worked toward over years of diligent practice. It is a recognition to be made now, in this moment, at this stage of your understanding about what you are at the level of the law, independent of what the current conditions of your experiential field have been reporting about your previous identification. The current conditions are the past frequency's faithful expression. They are not the inevitable future. The future is determined by the frequency you are, present tense, operative now, effective from the moment the identification is made at the level where the law receives it. The recognition that makes the identification operative is not an act of imagination or of will. It is an act of correct understanding applied to what Holmes consistently described as the already existing truth. That you are an individualized expression of the universal mind, that the frequency you constitute is the operative pattern from which your experiential field takes its form, and that the universal mind has no preference for expressing you in any form other than the one your frequency constitutes. The universal mind is pure substance, infinite, undifferentiated, perfectly responsive, and entirely without preference. It fills the mold it is given. It expresses the pattern it receives. It does not evaluate the pattern for worthiness. It does not withhold expression until some condition of readiness is met. It expresses now, continuously, with the precision of a system that has no mechanism for doing anything else. Recognize what you are, not what you would like to be, not what you intend to become through the faithful application of a better practice. What you are, at the level of the law, at the level of the first cause principle, at the level of the universal mind's infinite and perfectly responsive substance. You are a specific frequency pattern through which infinite intelligence is expressing at this particular point of individualization. The frequency you constitute is the instruction the universal mind is executing right now, without delay, without partial execution, without the possibility of misunderstanding. Be that frequency without apology and without effort, not the effortless quality of one who has abandoned the intention, but the effortlessness of one who has stopped generating and started being, the effortlessness of the tuning fork that does not try to vibrate, but simply is the vibration, the effortlessness of the mathematical equation that does not try to produce its solution, but simply is the relationship of terms from which the solution is inevitable. The field has no choice but to express it. The law does not permit any other outcome. It never has. It is not structured to be what you intend the field to express. The field will express it. There is no further instruction required. There is no additional step between the being and the expressing. The law is the bridge, and the bridge has never been out of service. It was only the position from which you were approaching it, the position of the generator, standing on the wrong side, sending signals across a gap that was never structural, but only perceptual, that made the crossing seem uncertain. The gap is not real. The separation is not structural. The field is not external. It is you, made visible. The pattern you are, expressed in the substance that the universal mind perpetually and indifferently provides to every mold it receives. You are the mold. You are the frequency. You are the first cause. The field is the effect. Between them, the law operates with the mathematical certainty of a universe that has never once, in its entire history of operation, produced any other result than the precise expression of the pattern it received. It will not begin to deviate now. It has no mechanism for deviation. You are the frequency. The field expresses it. This is the law. Here is the challenge Holmes is teaching places before the practitioner at this stage of understanding. The challenge that converts the intellectual comprehension of the law into its operative inhabitation. For the next 24 hours, you are going to become a diagnostician. Not a diagnostician of the external field. Do not look at the conditions of your experience with increased analytical attention. You are going to become a diagnostician of your own structural position, moment by moment, in the ordinary course of your day. Your single task is this. Notice every moment in which you relate to your frequency as something you are generating, adjusting, raising, or maintaining. Notice the effort directed at producing a better frequency output. Notice the monitoring of the inner state for dips below the desired level. Notice the look toward the external environment for confirmation that the signal has been received. Every one of those moments is the generator position, the structural misidentification that Holmes spent his entire career correcting. Every one of those moments is the mold taking the shape of separation, and the universal mind substance filling that shape with the faithful precision that is the law's only mode of operation. In each of those moments, and there will be many of them, because the generator pattern is deeply conditioned and reasserts itself with the tenacity of anything that has been reinforced for years. Execute the identity correction. Precisely. Do not shame the generator position. Do not use its appearance as evidence of insufficient spiritual development. Use it as the diagnostic information it is. The system has reverted to a structural pattern that the law cannot reward. Then make the correction, stated to yourself in the language that encodes the correct structural position. I am not generating this frequency. I am this frequency expressing. The field is not responding to my output. It is expressing my pattern. Hold that corrected identification for 30 seconds. Notice the physical difference between the generator position and the embodiment position. The shift from the effortful tension of one who is producing and projecting to the settled expansion of one who is being what they are. Notice that difference not as a feeling to be maintained, but as a confirmation that the structural correction has been made. Then proceed with whatever you were doing, from the embodiment position until the generator pattern reasserts itself and requires the correction again. At the end of 24 hours, the record of those corrections will give you more precise information about the operative structure of your current identification than any amount of self-examination could provide. Each moment of generator pattern reversion is a specific data point. The situations, the thoughts, the emotional triggers, and the relational contexts in which the identification with separation is most deeply conditioned. That data is not a record of failure. It is the map of the territory where the deeper work of identity correction is needed, the terrain that spiritual mind treatment was designed to address. Use the map. Now, before you leave this space, there is one thing that will seal this understanding more permanently than any note you could take, any highlight you could mark, any summary you could write. Think of one moment in your own experience, one specific moment, not a general pattern, but a specific event, in which the law Holmes describes was already operating through you, for you, or against you, whether you understood it at the time or not. The moment in which something you had deeply, fundamentally identified with, not hoped for, not worked toward, but truly identified as what you were, expressed itself in the conditions of your external life with an exactness that, in hindsight, is unmistakable as the law's operation. You have such a moment. Every practitioner of your experience has such a moment. Write it in the comments below. Not for this channel, not as a contribution to a discussion. Write it for yourself. Because the mind that can correctly identify the law operating in the past has just acquired something of permanent value, the capacity to recognize the same mechanism in the present and to operate it consciously, deliberately, and precisely going forward. That recognition is not the conclusion of this study. It is the beginning of mastery. And there is one more action available to you before you go. Write in the comments below one specific area of your experience that you are claiming. Now, in this moment, as the first operative act of the understanding you have just received, as the expression of the frequency you are, not the frequency you are working to achieve, not the frequency you intend to generate through more diligent practice. The frequency you are declaring yourself to be, present tense, effective now, stated as the field's inevitable expression of the pattern you have chosen to embody as your operative identity. One area, one declaration, stated not as a wish and not as an intention, but as the decree of a consciousness that has recognized itself as the first cause of its own experiential reality, and is issuing the first operative instruction from that position. The universal mind substance is listening, not with judgment, not with evaluation, not with any mechanism for deciding whether the declaration merits fulfillment. With the perfect, indifferent, absolute responsiveness of a field that has no function except to express the pattern it receives. Issue the pattern. The field will express it. The law does not permit any other outcome. It never has. And it is waiting, as it has always been waiting, without impatience, without preference, and without the option of refusal. For precisely this declaration, from precisely this position, at precisely this moment, that you have just made yours.